Thanks for tuning in and welcome back to another 2023 season preview edition of the Slipstream, a Formula One podcast. As always, joining me tonight for an all-French episode are my bons amis, which are good friends in French, Austin, Matthew, and Cole Trickle Jr. For this episode, we're going to continue our 2023 team previews where we go all the way from the bottom to all the way to the top to get you up to speed as we get closer and closer to the 2023 Formula One season. Hey, did you guys know that Slipstream in French is sillage? I'm sure I butchered that a little bit. Without further ado, let's get into Team Alpine. The biggest news of 2023 offseason has to be Fernando Alonso leaving to join Aston Martin, and Alpine being able to pull Pierre Gasly away from Red Bull to form the first all-French driver pairing since 1982 for the team. So, Stin, I'm going to start with you with this question. Why do you think Fernando Alonso was so ready to leave Alpine for 2022? After 2022?
It's interesting when you talk to him the first couple of interviews, the first few weeks, he was saying that he should be in like fourth or fifth in the championship. He had an amazing car and he was in a wonderful opportunity to haul in so many points, and everything just kept going wrong for him. We talked about it late last year at the end of the season where he had, I think, a span of maybe 10 or 11 races where something went wrong in every race, whether it be, Australia, where like he was thinking he could qualify in the top 3 or 4, had issues in qualifying, like the list just goes on. So I think he, two-time world champion, he's a phenomenal driver. He still has it even into his 40s, but I think he's also not willing to wait around for something to happen. I think he's very willing to jump ship and find the next team to see if it gives him the right opportunity.
So, Cole, I'm curious. Do you think his relationship within Team Alpine or their performance or some other internal factor was the main reason he left Alpine for Aston? Or do you think just the Lawrence Stroll, Brinks money truck was just so big that he decided to take the money and run?
I think he fell in love with green. All the green. Aston green, money green, Stroll green. He fell in love with it. I mean, this season proves that Alpine was obviously faster than Aston was. They had some reliability issues, but Aston they're coming online still. They're still kind of an up and coming team building. So I see I see the excitement and the draw. I mean, Lawrence Stroll wanted him originally, but he got Sebastian. So it's nice that he got Fernando. But ultimately, Alpine lost a 2-time world champion and they picked up Pierre Gasly. So great for them. They get to build an all-French team. But I think losing Fernando is a horrible detriment for that team. But it's very exciting for the green on green Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, so Matt, Alonso towards the end of the season was very vocal with some of the issues that Alpine had with reliability, with engine issues. He kept saying there's always something wrong with car number 14, and just some of the other things he said, whether it was team radio or in a post-race interview. And Fernando, he's not going to hold his tongue, right? He was ready to move on. It was very clear. So with those 2022 reliability struggles, how many DNFs did Alpine have? Was it more than the rest? Was it a real bad issue? And they still finished fourth, which is kind of crazy given the reliability issues that Fernando seemed to have had.
Yeah, so they weren't the worst. Alfa Romeo was the worst. But Fernando had 4 DNFs. He had a 5th race where he technically qualified to finish, but he didn't make it all the way around the track. There was only about 4 drivers that had more than him, but he was by far the driver with the most in the top 10. He was unlucky, and it wasn't even just his DNFs, right? There were plenty of races where something would go wrong in the middle of it that would cost him 4 spots, where there was an issue during a pit or whatever it may be, and he loses points because of it. And I think that had more to do with it than the money per contracts. He actually took a pay cut to go to Aston. Alpine from whatever articles you can find, F1's not as, out there with their money as some other sports are, but it looked like he was making 25 million a year at Alpine, and a Spanish newspaper said he's 17.8 at Aston Martin. So he did take a pay cut. $17.8 million after a pay cut sounds nice. But I think it's probably both, right? Who knows what's been guaranteed to him, first off, right? That's not reported. But I think he leaves a team that he just didn't trust anymore. Lewis Hamilton did the same thing, right, with McLaren. It was the same thing back then. At some point when you lose trust, the money doesn't matter. If you don't think you can finish races, or you don't think you can finish where you should be finishing, it's time to part ways, and Fernando's smart enough to know that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Alpine was maybe the most consistent, even though they had some reliability issues when it was on the track, whether it was qualifying, whether it was in the race. I feel like they were the most consistent performance-wise. In kind of a weird way, it was kind of surprising that they finished fourth, right? And, the history of the last 5 years with Team Alpine, which was obviously Renault, is remarkably consistent. 2022, they were fourth with 173 points. 2021, they were fifth with 155 points. There were no years in 2020. They were fifth again with 181. 2019, fifth again with 91. And then 2018, fourth with 122. Esteban finished P8 in the drivers. Fernando finished P9 in the drivers. So, their 2022 was pretty good. Regardless of those reliability issues, they still beat McLaren for P5, which is a big win for them. So turning the page to 2023, we obviously know Fernando is out. And my boy, Pierre Gasly, is in. We've already mentioned that it's an all-French lineup for 2023. So, Stin, kind of a weird question here, but do you think that matters, or do you think it adds pressure being an all-French lineup for a French constructor?
I think it's cool, but I don't think it adds pressure. I mean, would we say that George felt more pressure racing for Mercedes than Bottas did last year or the 2 years prior? I think it's interesting, and I think that the constructor is excited, and it's a nice, it's a nice thing to be able to relay to your fans, right? You're keeping it in the country, but I don't think it's relevant on the track.
It's a money thing. I mean, it doesn't really necessarily help on the, does it matter? But fans are going to buy more Pierre Gasly merch because he's with their home team instead of being at Alpha. I think it helps them monetarily off the track, not necessarily on.
Yeah, speaking of merch, I got to do this real quick. I'm going to go full NWO here and get rid of my AlphaTauri for those watching on YouTube. My boy Pierre, get rid of the AlphaTauri and go in my Alpine gear. So I had to throw on my Slipstream shades that Cole has put together for us. So got my blue, got my Alpine, Pierre Gasly, all in 2023. Cole, I'm going to go with you with this next question. I know Pierre has been sort of looking to get out from underneath the Red Bull umbrella for the last few seasons. There was some, controversy of him getting removed out of that Red Bull seat, maybe some hope that he'd get back in that Red Bull seat. That obviously didn't and hasn't happened. Do you think he's going to have a sense of freedom being away from Red Bull?
I do. I think it's going to be. Well, let me say, I hope it's a great experience for him. I think it's all you could ever hope and or dream for as a race car driver, is to race for your home constructor. So I'm gonna say there is some pressure for him to carry that on, but I think that Pierre, I think he's the future of Alpine. I think that he and Esteban have got enough that they got to get through anyway. I think that Pierre is the guy. I think that he gets to carry the baton forward. I think he got kind of a raw deal with Red Bull. He didn't get really a fair shake, and it was It was unfortunate. It played out in a kind of a nasty way in the public and on Drive to Survive, and I think people felt really bad for him. So I know we were all we talked about it last season, like, hey, what if you got to ride at Alpine? Like, how cool would that be to ride for your home constructor? So yeah, I mean, I think he does get some pressure. I do think he gets to carry the baton forward for the team. But I think that he does get some freedom, more freedom than he had at Red Bull Tauri on the B team. So I think it's a really huge and exciting move for Pierre Gasly.
Do you think Alpine is happy where they landed with everything that went on the offseason? Fernando leaving, Oski P leaving in a dramatic fashion, to then getting Pierre. Are they happy that they got Pierre because they didn't think they could have him prior to all this? Or are they a little disheartened with how everything went?
It's a great question. I mean, you got to hate losing a 2-time world champion, potentially 4 or 5-time world champion in Fernando Alonso. You got to hate losing an F2, F3 world champion in Oscar Piastri, and you're getting Pierre Gasly. No offense against Pierre. I think it's the best that they could have done with what they had. They didn't want to lose Oscar. They built Oscar from nothing and hoped that he would be the guy, and he left them. So I think Pierre is the best answer Otmar could come up with that was hopefully willing to make it work.
Yeah, man, I think you're maybe alluding to plan A was Oscar, plan B, or maybe plan A was keep Alonso, plan B was Oscar, and then maybe did they fall to plan C with Pierre? Maybe, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to end up the winner here. It's not an apples to apples comparison, but Pierre beat Fernando 2 years ago. Last year, I think the AlphaTauri was one of the worst cars when it came to the new regulations. We've talked about that in our AlphaTauri preview episode, so go check that out if you haven't already. So Stan, I know you're sort of our resident Red Bull fan. I mean, Pierre Gasly was essentially stuck in that AlphaTauri, right? He wasn't getting moved up. They weren't performing. So do you think this is going to alleviate any ill will he had? Do you think this is going to be a good move for Pierre? What do you make of it?
Yeah, I don't know if any driver has been demoted from the main team to the sister team and come back. I don't think anyone expected Pierre to be able to go back to Red Bull from Tari. I think it's a great opportunity for him to get out from under the wing at Red Bull to maybe prove or be able to say I'm doing something better or differently for a different constructor or supplier or whoever. But again, let's wait and see how he does and see if he, can beat his teammate head to head, because I think that's the most important thing for him this year.
Yeah, I personally think it's a great move for Pierre. I mean, we'll see if it's a great move for Team Alpine. But great move from Pierre. I think it's going to re-energize him. He's going to feel like he's going to be in a better car for sure. I mean, the Alpine was way better than the AlphaTauri last year, so that's got to be giving him some good vibes going into 2023. Obviously, Pierre's not the only driver on Alpine. He's got his buddy, childhood buddy, Estebon Ocon there. And so, Matt, I know you've done some digging into this. There's been some conversations about their rocky friendship over the years, and they used to be really good friends, then kind of had a falling out, and now they're teammates. So give us a little scoop on what you've been able to find out in terms of the Pierre Gasly likes on Estebon Ocon's social media feed.
Well, they don't like each other. They say they do now because they're teammates, but they just don't. I don't know what the reason is. In American sports, there's 3 things that ruin teammates' friendships in American sports. It's money, it's cards, and it's women. I don't know what it is across the pond, but something happened between these guys, right? So we did a post on our Instagram at the Slipstream F1 pod at the season ended, and Pierre Gasly liked Estebon Ocon's post less than any other driver on the 2022 grid. Outside of, I think, Latifi, but he didn't follow Latifi. I just checked just now, up to date, whatever day we're doing this pod, the last 25 Estebon posts, Pierre has liked 4, but 3 of them have Pierre in the post. So I don't know if he's liking it because it's Esteban or he's just liking it because he's like, look at me, I'm in it. But they don't like each other. They don't get along. It'll be a good Drive to Survive episode, I'm sure, when it comes out. But I can't wait to see how they interact going forward.
Yeah, I mean, look, for those that don't know, there's a whole meme about how many posts that Pierre Gasly likes. And so the fact that he liked Esteban's the least out of any other driver is interesting, right? Now, can they make up? They've said they have. We'll see if they do. There's been some pictures of them together at basketball games and whatnot throughout the offseason. But Cole, sometimes having a little inter-team rivalry can be good, right? We know that Ocon wasn't afraid to put his elbows out against Alonso. Alonso was very vocal about that. I think he almost jammed him into the wall a couple times. But Esteban's kind of this interesting character. I mean, we don't really hear much from him. He might be sort of that most off-the-radar driver, at least here. So what do we make of Ocon?
I mean, I'm an Ocon hater. I'm just going to be honest about it. I don't like him. I'm not saying he's not a great driver. He just doesn't seem to have a lot of personality that we get exposed to. That, we don't see a whole lot of him. But the run-ins that I've seen him have with Max in Brazil, trying to unlap himself, there've been just a handful of Ocon moments that were less than ideal in how he reacted. And I will say I'm really looking forward to seeing how these two interact on and off the track. I obviously think that they've buried the hatchet, but I think that there is a lot that's going to play out on the track this season between the two. I think we have a lot of great rivals this season. K-Mag and Hulk, right? Lance and Fernando now get to come together, but I do think that Pierre and Estebon might be fireworks. If they can stay out of each other's way, I hopefully expect big things for them, but they're going to come into each other, and how they tackle it and how they come apart and how Otmar deals with the post-race ramifications will be really exciting to see.
I think we all appreciate the Netflix Drive to Survive series. I think the more of a hardcore fan you are, the more, I guess, distorted it is from what actually happened. But I am really looking forward to seeing that dynamic be captured on Netflix and see kind of what's spun from it. We don't know what's going to happen in the 2023 season, but I just feel like there's going to be some pretty great clips or drama coming into, the 2024 season, recapping their interactions across the year.
I think one of the most interesting storylines that may play out early is sort of who's the team lead, right? Now, maybe the team doesn't give preference to one or the other, but if Pierre comes in as the technical leader or is given preference, I don't think Ocon's going to handle that well at all. And so that just may add to, Otmar's got to handle that, right? I mean, that's his job. So it just may add to some early season sort of, growing pains, if you will, between the two, but we'll see.
I'm not an Esteban Ocon historian, but outside of him getting lucky and hungry in 2021, I don't know of a positive or fun thing about him in the last several years. Like nothing comes to the top of my head besides him getting super lucky in that race. Maybe y'all have one, but this guy over here does not have anything.
The only thing I have, he did some kind of race against Ian Poulter, who's a big golfer, who's also a huge motorsport and Formula One fan. They had a fun little thing, but that's about it. That's only sort of all of the personality that I've seen for Estebon. And of course, we're not exposed to everything. Maybe he's the funniest guy in the world, but yeah, he's just not a newsmaker, which isn't a bad thing. He kind of goes about his business. Not too many highs, not too many lows. You don't hear him making too many or see him making too many mistakes on the track. I guess we'd like to get to know him a little bit more. And, personally, I might, because I'll be following Alpine a little bit closer to keep tabs on my boy Pierre this year. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see how they get along early and often throughout the season. Maybe there'll be some fireworks early at Bahrain. Maybe, Cole, to your point, they buried the hatchet and there won't be. They are in a good car. I think they've got a real shot to do something this year. So we'll allude and go into some predictions. So Matt, we'll start with you. Where do you see Alpine finishing in 2023?
I think they fought a fifth. More so to do with, I think McLaren makes a little bit of a jump. They capitalize on some issues that they had last year. Even though I do like Pierre, not sure how much better he can produce than what Fernando did outside of finishing races if the car's, reliable. Or they finish 10th because they get in a massive brawl in the paddock at some point, and Pierre breaks his hand through a fight, and they're just scrapping it out. It's either 5th or it's 10th because of just absolute chaos, in my opinion.
Stan, what about you?
I think, when we were talking about the McLaren preview, these guys keep kind of popping up, Alpine and McLaren. I feel like they're so close. Matt said 5th. I go with 4th. I do think that Pierre will perform as well as Fernando. I think Pierre is a good driver. Clearly, he was at Red Bull, and while he wasn't getting podiums, he was good enough to be given that seat. So there has to be something for that, and he's still decently young in his career. I also think that he outright beats Ocon, probably more than 58% points share, maybe 60 plus. But I think they go 4th. I don't think they have enough yet, enough traction to close to the top 3. But I think that they are distancing themselves from that midfield and kind of falling into that, the joke about how Red Bull was in Formula 1, Ferrari and Mercedes were in Formula 1.5, everyone else is in Formula 2. I feel like Alpine is getting close to making that jump into that, Formula 1.5 in the near future.
I think that they're going to go mid best of the rest. I think they're going to go to 6th. I think losing Fernando is tough. I think that you got 2 new drivers, or a new team that you got to learn to mesh, that they got to learn to deal with each other on the track in equal equipment. I think there will be a learning curve. I think there will be some bumps and bruises along the way. So I don't think that their car is slower. I just think that they have some reliability, and I think there's some growing pains with the team. So I expect them to be fast. Same thing, maybe 2024, they're really fast again, but I think this season they're just kind of going through a little learning curve.
Yeah, for me, this is sort of my most interesting pick of the year. I think they're going to finish 4th. As we talked about early in the podcast, they've been remarkably consistent, 4th or 5th within the last 5 years. But it's going to be weird. Pierre Gasly is going to be world champion. So how that makes them 4th, I don't know. The math probably doesn't add up there. I'm kidding, obviously. Pierre's not going to be world champion. God, that'd be amazing. I'd fly to France and celebrate with him if I could. But no, I think Pierre's going to have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. I think something to prove. I think Alpine proved that, with the new regulations, they have a really good car. Estebon, for all that we don't know about him, performed well, finished 8th in the driver's standing last year. So I think they'll stay 4th. I think they could flirt with whoever ends up being 3rd. I think they'll beat McLaren. We talked about this a little bit on our McLaren preview. I think McLaren might have a few early season growing pains, but I think the midfield battle is going to be amazing, regardless of who finishes where. I think Aston's on the rise. I think Alpine, we know. McLaren, we know. I think, you never know with Haas. I think that midfield battle might be the best battle of the entire season. So there could be a lot of moving parts there, but I'm going to go with Alpine in 4th and hoping for a Pierre Gasly World Championship.
I love the optimism for the Pierre Gasly. I really do. That would be great for him. It would be an exciting thing for France and John. When was the last time there won a world championship? Early 2000s. It's been a while, so it'd be exciting to see him. But I think they got a few years for it. But I'm all in. Pierre Gasly World Champion. Let's see it.
I would like to say also that Alpine had all these DNFs, and so I guess we're counting on that not happening. They've had reliability issues for years now. Years where I don't think they've had less than 5 DNFs. I just went back 7 or 8 years. They've had 5 DNFs, 6 DNFs, 7 DNFs. One of the reasons Danny Rick left Renault, Alpine to go to McLaren was because they couldn't finish races. The engine kept failing. I don't know how much we can consider them to actually lower or increase their ability to finish races because they haven't done it in half a decade at this point.
Yeah, Matt, not to interrupt you, but you look at where Red Bull is now. They left Renault, they went Honda, they're now doing their own powertrain. They realized that the engine was extremely fragile and they made the shift, and it was a shift that was good enough to make it so Red Bull wasn't this like slowest engine and unreliability. Like they've really made some pretty substantial leaps.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys know this, but Pierre Gasly actually has his PhD in mechanics. I'm kidding. Obviously. But yeah, so, I think, if there's not a fist fight in the middle of the paddock in preseason testing, Matt, I think Alpine's got a lot to be excited about. They've got 2 French drivers, a French team, a good car. Lots to look forward to in 2023. I know some people like me are excited, and we'll see what happens. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to check us out on social media, Instagram, TikTok, at the Slipstream F1 Pod. Give us your thoughts, your feedback. And to all the trolls, no, I don't really think Pierre Gasly is going to win the championship. I just hope. So, as always, we're marching you down from number 10 to number 1 in our preseason preview. So check out all of the constructors for 2023 as we get you primed and ready for the season to kick off in a couple of days in Bahrain. So with that, as always, thanks for tuning in. Peace.